All right. Thank you, Mia. A little bit of disclaimer, as I've woken up with a bit of a stuffed nose. So if you have trouble hearing me, then let me know, and I'll try to make some changes on my end. And first of all, thank you all for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk a bit about platform engineering to other people from this software life, so to speak. And I'll kind of get right into it, I guess. And what I'll talk about today is developer experience in platform engineering. And I'll see if my setup here works with the slides. It's been a bit funny. All right, so you can see my, you should see my rubber duck here on the screen, a little bit of a hello message. So I'm, like Mia said, my name is Michael Hindley. I've been working with software for about 20 years now, and the past 5 or 6 years focus on platform engineering and building internal platforms for companies in the Stockholm region and in Sweden. Most notably, I think the code to customer project at Klarna was a fun one, and I think what's kind of happening across many types of organizations that are looking into platform engineering and kind of realizing they've been in this classical DevOps world where sysadmins move kind of inside the teams starting around 2006 with AVS kind of launching, and this you build it, you run it strategy. And why I think platform engineering is growing in popularity a lot is that more and more organizations are kind of realizing that very high levels of team autonomy and high levels of ownership across both, let's say, app and ops stacks are kind of undesirable. They lead to a lot of fragmentation and complexity. And I've taken some excerpts from ThoughtWorks and Gartner from their tech radars and kind of lay of the land. It mimics a lot my own experience in that it started around 5 years ago. A lot of talk about why is feature delivery slowing down in a lot of software teams. Why is it that when we plan a new feature, it takes sometimes weeks or months to get into production state? And this is kind of what platform engineering aims to solve with this concept of platform engineering product teams. And it's been a fun journey the last few years. More and more around 2020, a lot of software teams started trialing this concept and started focusing on distinct areas within their organization that they can simplify with the platform. In some organizations, that's literally just taking like, how do we take a container into production in a safe and secure way? Why is every team writing their own CloudFormation for ECS? Why do we have 5 different ways to run containers on Google on Google Run on the Cloud Run service? And kind of this year, you see more and more adoption that organizations have just started to look at platform teams as just another product team, like any other in an organization, except that the platform product teams, they look on the inside. They treat other developers in the organization as customers, whereas other types of product teams would perhaps treat the market and the users from there as the customers, being both private and both B2B and B2C. And yeah, so I did define the problem a little bit, and it comes down to that eventually, as the ops stack grows and the app stack grows, these kind of product teams that are created to deliver value and features, they find themselves spending more and more time working with kind of non-feature work, be it infrastructure or governance or security And there's a lot of different of those type of areas, and they all kind of find themselves being outside of the core business domain that they were initially created. The reason to be for a team is not to create infrastructure or do those type of solutions most of the time. It's to deliver some sort of value to a customer, and along the way, the need to do some infrastructure work kind of presents itself. And these things tie into a platform strategy. A lot of organizations have a accidental platform strategy. I like to split up in 3 different parts, which is design, technology, and culture. And one of the core tenets of platform engineering is creating abstractions for self-service. So if you are a product team and your customers are internal developers, the most common approach to serve those is to create abstractions that enable self-service for these developers. So if you just want to take a container into production, a platform team would facilitate that and enable you to do so with some sort of self-service flow. And what the different teams that then create value are kind of bogged down by, to phrase it in terms of cognitive load, which is also a concept very popular in platform engineering. And identifying cognitive load is one of the ways that you create data for making decisions to improve the developer experience. So interviewing value line teams and product teams, that work toward the market rather than toward inside the organization. Like how does your cognitive load look like, and why do you find yourself spending time not aligned with doing feature work? And the first type is the intrinsic, which the intrinsic cognitive load is fundamental to a team's software delivery pace. It's this kind of knowledge and experience that a team gets building tools and services to create this value for their customers. For a backend developer, maybe if you're a Java developer, you over time you're working with Spring Boot, you get better and better working with Spring Boot. You figure out how to leverage building features to solve business problems. For a more classical DevOps engineer, maybe you're working with GitLab or GitHub, so getting to know how to create pipelines, the GitHub API, how access controls works. All of those are kind of intrinsic tasks, and they are very, very important for your ability to deliver value. And the other type of cognitive load is the germane cognitive load, which is also a good type of cognitive load. It's kind of fundamental to a team's ability to understand how to create the value. So if you're the best Java developer in the world and Spring Boot inside and out, well, that doesn't really help you contribute to the organization's goals and value delivery in a vacuum. You still need to understand, all right, I have this intrinsic knowledge, I know how to use it, these tools, but how do I apply that to the domain on delivering value? And then there's the kind of extraneous cognitive load, which oftentimes is about the environment that the team operates in, and these are things that can get in the way of delivering value. And oftentimes this starts small and grows over time, and often is one of the core reasons for fragmentation and complexity in the technical stack or in the company and product as a whole. And the magnetic scroll wheel is hypersensitive on Google Slides. I don't know if anyone relates to that, but it's funny to me. Right, so I'll use an example domain to illustrate the gains you can get in developer experience and reducing cognitive load. And the domain I chose for this presentation is authentication and authorization. What you should see on the screen now is a pretty straightforward flow, where you have a client exchange credentials with a central IAM service to get a token. It then uses a token to fire a request to some API, and that API then talks with the IAM service also to make a decision, and then a response is returned. And this can be allowed or not allowed. And and oftentimes you would perhaps just get a certificate in the API and check against that. But the kind of source of authority is going to be the central IAM service here. And how complex and cumbersome this flow is can vary greatly across different organizations and projects. A startup, for instance, maybe just buys something straight off the shelf, like Auth0, that being the IAM box on top, and sets up a super optimistic flow just to solve the technical problem of authentication authorization, meaning there's no segregation of duty, there's no governance structure, there's no 4S principles around managing access to the underlying sources for the IAM service. And then on the flip side, a fair amount of stops layer on that journey, and that startup is now an enterprise company. They now have a central ISIC organization. They have 4S principles, so across every decision point, all the governance and compliance is in place. And they need to have kind of strong multi-factor controls and reasonable policy decision points. And the complexity grows as your business grows many times. Not only in tech, the complexity grows in a lot of different ways. And somewhere in between there, between that startup and enterprise, is kind of the most common scenario where a scale-up company finds itself with some teams on a honeymoon period still kind of enjoying the simplicity, and then others that have started to kind of feel this pain and limits of the early stage optimistic solutions. And management starts looking into, okay, how do we start solving this? And pretty much any solution is going to lead to a pretty fair amount of backlog pressure for all the different teams. And so some of the good cognitive load in this domain would be, and this would be desirable for any product team to reason about. I'll check my timing real quick here. That would be reasoning about which kind of resources do we have in our service. If our domain was a kitchen, let's say a resource to be something like the oven. So the oven would have then also a set of actions that users could perform on it, like turn on or set temperature or set mode, etc. And then you have some way of interacting with these things for a client. Generally, it might be a user-facing UI like the browser, but it can also be a service client, meaning some other API that's also calling your oven's service, and trying to turn on the oven. Then on the Germain side for the auth, you think about which type of users and roles you need to support. This is still aligned with the customer, with what you want to do. It's still very local to your service, so it's still very relevant and good. You need to understand kind of which boundaries you have that you need to enforce authentication authorization. That ties into security and having security as a culture in the workflow, and thinking about, hey, are we doing something? Maybe is this legal? Are there any regulatory constraints with this type of data access? GDPR being one of those kind of things that maybe you need to start think a little bit about. And that's kind of gray area. If that's a good point of load or not, that depends really on what you're doing. So both of those together is what I would call good cognitive load in the auth domain. And oh yeah, that was the magnetic scroll. Sorry. All right. And then there's the extraneous cognitive load, which starts to get pretty complex. So if you need to you're establishing a software team and you have a new feature, a new product, you don't really want that team to understand IAM deeply necessarily. You don't want them spending weeks or months getting to know OAuth and OpenID Connect and reasoning about certificate management and Pixie Flow, crafting pipelines, setting up infrastructure, permissions for all of these different things. And then also, actually understanding what they're doing, because these are quite dangerous things to get wrong. So you need to have some sort of domain expertise. Then you need to start reasoning at, so how do we express that in an architecture that we can maintain and support and have ownership over and explain as part of our onboarding, and so on and so on. So this grows quite quickly to a very, very complex thing. And the team, you see it also in the job ads that, hey, so you need to know Java, and maybe we run ABS or bit of information, but then, oh wow, OpenID Connect, Pixie Flow, and all of a sudden, that part becomes very, very hard also. And that's before kind of take into consideration, like, all right, maybe the company is active in Europe right now, but yeah, we're expanding to Asia soon, and then we have plans to expand to Australia. Well, this complex domain that's really not aligned with anything we do to create value. Our kitchen doesn't really care. Our kitchen solutions don't care about OpenID or OAuth or any of those things. It's just something we have to get out of the way to have a good, a good service. But it's nothing that our customer really cares about. It doesn't differentiate us in any way on the market. It's just like a hygiene factor that we need to keep track of. All right. And to next here. So how can we remove the cognitive load? So what I want to introduce is the newly formed identity and authorization team. And what this team does is they supply software as a service to the other product teams. They look to the inside to identify the customers, so they're not active on the market or reasoning about those type of things, but only looking at developers in the organization as the customers. And they want to provide a great developer experience. So when we reason about these kind of nitty-gritty things, and I use ALF and IAM as an example, but realistically, you oftentimes have whoops, all right. Do you still see the screen? I hope so. As I lost my controls here, sorry. 1 sec. Sorry, 1 second. There's a bit of a problem with window management here, physical window management on the screens. All right. So the other types of kind of central services that we wish to consume oftentimes is then PubSub or state storage like databases. Essentially, what you can replace is the ALF team, and let's say there's also a bar crawl team that does PubSub. They provide integrations to a central platform, which is expressed as a set of self-service abstractions. And then each team that kind of has IAM needs, they can configure, consume that solution. So they don't need to maintain integrations. They don't need to understand OAuth or OpenID Connect or Pixie Flow or any of that. They can just focus on which type of resources do we have, like we have an oven, which type of actions do we want to users and clients to perform on that, and maybe some roles like turning on the oven and so on and so forth. And they are then liberated from that cognitive load, in the sense that instead of understanding all those things and maybe the differences between Europe and Asia and Australia, all of that complexity and cognitive load is the IAM teams, the team ops. That's their domain. They provide that seamlessly, and the product teams that are aligned with the customer and the market side, they just consume that. And this is an example of how that could be expressed. It's a common pattern. I know some companies choose to go the kind of SDK library route if they have a tight technology stack. I think Einride is one of those here from Stockholm, where they have a container-based platform with SDKs and library support. But in this example, you have a manifest. Let's say it's a YAML file. It lives together with your inside your repository of your API. So if you have an API, you're packaging it as a container. The platform team would establish a contract, a self-service way of consuming IAM. And this is like an example of that. You can see team Barcrow here with the pub sub also. Maybe they have a Kafka broker and you wish to subscribe to a topic and you wish to receive messages from a topic to an endpoint on your service. So rather than needing to contact that team and needing to do custom integrations and maintain them, you just add to the manifest like, hey, I want to process orders, so send all new orders to this process orders endpoint of my service, and I'll get to those. And this is a kind of optimistic, simple solution, simple way of showing this. Oftentimes, there's a few more things to fill out here, but this set of shared abstractions, that's going to vary between company to company and team to team. And we can see kind of how this Extraneous cognitive load then is a little bit different from a platform supported perspective. So instead of the teams having to do all of those OAuth things and networking and infrastructure for that, as an example, the IAM team could provide an SDK or a library rather, where you would call get token, you specify which actions resources you wish to have as part of the claims of that token. You would then find a request. In this example, we're assuming a container-based platform in the middle. Perhaps the platform teams have, they've chosen to express their contracts through a sidecar that you talk to behind some ingress and so on. And that sidecar then reads the manifest, and that is tied to your API and kind of knows what to do. So the inside of the API is really not aware. So the application complexity is also greatly reduced. If you worked with perhaps AWS API gateway, the Lambda authorizer, it's a little bit of the same concept in this example, where the inside application is not even aware of the policy enforcement happening in the network layer. So you can be very optimistic on the inside of the application in this case, which is very nice. So you can express all your IAM needs through a pattern of configuring and consuming something instead of creating and owning a custom integration that you then also have to test, you have to maintain. It's part, of your onboarding. It adds a lot of cognitive load to your team members, so it's quite simplified in the manner of, hey, we can just kind of go into production quickly now. And yeah, I use IAM, but there's a lot of different areas. A holistic platform tries to address some or all of these, working with one team at a time, working bottom up, trying to understand the product team's use cases and trying to understand the organization's goals and kind of finding this alignment between those different parts. And what oftentimes is, there's some extreme examples. I've been in projects where exactly this happened, where new teams, having this classic DevOps structure of the ability to run it, from top to bottom, take about 1 to 3 months to get into an actual good production grade state and have, maturity, stability, and reliability across not only their business domain solution, like their actual API, but everything that they built around it. And that goes into the technology, that goes into their onboarding, into the recruitment process, into the competence development, it's a lot to kind of to understand, to do some of these things on that type of level. Whereas platform supported teams then who took over all of those different areas, or rather where platforms teams took over all those different areas, they then enable product teams to just write their logic and press a button and they're in production. So this is one of the DORA metrics, change lead time. If you're not familiar with DORA, I suggest you look it up. It's a quite good thing to get to know. It's a great indicator of the maturity of your software delivery lifecycle. You know, how long does it take to go into production, how often do you have issues, and so on. And yeah, that was me. If you wanna, I do some workshops in this area from time to time. If you want to know some more, you can see my mail on the bottom, and feel free to reach out. And